9:13 p.m., but I really wanted to film this video. We will talk about the 5 books and 3 comic books that I finished in the month of January. It has always been and always will be FIs. If you have the privilege or capacity to donate time, resources, or energy to anything, it is helpful. 2 quotes. One I've been hearing a lot recently, and it's that action is the antidote to despair. So, you're not alone in this. The second quote, which really inspired this video and reminded me of why I love to make content around books. Percival Everett, author of The Trees and James, Erasure, Dr. No. I got to see him at an event at Clemson University last year, and one of the things he said that really stuck with me was reading is the most subversive thing that you can do. Reading is the most subversive thing that you can do, but also, especially, reading with a book club, reading a book and discussing the book is the most subversive thing that you can do. Talk about the reading goals that I had set for myself at the beginning of 2025 and just kind of do a refresher and see how I've been doing on my goals. I've been trying to think about how I want to count comic books into my reading goal. I think because I have read separate issues of a particular comic series, I'm going to count those separately. But if I read a volume in a comic series, I think I would count that as one book. So my first goal is to read 50 books in 2026. In January, I read 5 books and 3 comic books. Also participate in the Toni Morrison reading challenge. I have started that and I am loving it, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Bluest in a bit. Goal 3 is to read at least 1 classic, and technically I already did that with the Bluest, but I want to expand beyond just Toni Morrison and read another classic book. Number 4, attend 5 author events. I haven't attended anything in the month of January. I really haven't been out of the house this month, so I'm hoping something will pop up in February, but I know for sure that I will be going to an author event in March for a festival that I will be at. My next goal is to conduct at least 1 author interview. I have already scheduled an author interview for the month of March, and I cannot express to you how excited I am about this one. I don't want to talk about it yet because I don't have all my details and ducks aligned, so that's coming soon. But also, the festival that I'm attending in March, I think I might be able to interview an author. My last goal is to participate in the Wild Seeds book club, and I have not read the first book they read was Kindred, and I already read that, so I didn't want to read it. And then I thought they were going to move on to Dawn because I assumed that the photos of the books in the post, I thought that was the order we're reading in. So I have Dawn on hold, and it was between Dawn and Parable of the Sower, and I guess they had members vote, and Parable of the Sower won, which I already read. So instead of rereading it, I think I'm actually going to read the graphic novel version. So I will do that in February. I am on track and doing really well with my reading goals that I set for myself. I just want to make sure I take time each month to reflect on the goals that I set for myself, because in the past, I'm all about setting goals, but I never really check up on them or hold myself accountable. So this is me holding myself accountable. I have mentioned this book so many times. The first book that I read in the month of January was The Untelling by Tayari Jones. We follow our main character after a very traumatic childhood accident that left just her and her mother and her sister and killed her father and another sister. This tragedy has followed her throughout her entire life, has severely affected her mother and the rest of her family, and we follow her into young adulthood. I believe she's maybe 24, 25 years old. I think her childhood trauma has, of course, carried this huge weight and role in the way she is carrying out this pregnancy at 24, 25 years old, and the way she is holding back the truth from people she really needs to talk to. Pissed me off the most, and I had to sit and empathize with the character to really understand her. She knew that she had to tell the truth. It's mentioned so many times of she knows the situation that she's in and how it would be terrible for other people around her that she is kind of lying to by omission. I find myself empathizing a lot with the side characters in this book, not just our main character. I remember when I was reading this, the ending felt a little bit too quick for me for how I felt like the rest of the book was a slower pace. So I would just keep that in mind. I think this book is great for anyone wanting to read more about Black women characters in, I believe, the 80s and 90s, as well as women's health representation. And if you want to read more or read stories with mother-daughter relationships in them. And of course, I have a whole reading blog about me reading Bluest by Toni Morrison. And I think in that blog, I explained that I did not like this book, not because Toni Morrison isn't a beautiful writer, but because this was a hard book to read. I feel like as I was reading this, almost all of the characters we read about, as well as the system that perpetuates their thoughts of ugliness, their internalized racism, I feel like those are the true villains of the story. I will say I think the Bluest did challenge the way I see myself, the way I internalize beauty, what beauty means to me. I think I felt uncomfortable in almost every chapter, which is the point. And I think a work like this should be like studied. Like, you're not just reading this for entertainment, you are reading this to study Toni Morrison's work, to get down to the nitty-gritty of what she was trying to say. I cannot stop thinking about Pecola. The very last, I think the epilogue or that last chapter made me want to cry for Pecola. And I just keep reminding myself that Pecola was just a girl. She was just a girl, and I hate the circumstances in which she was put under. The next book that I read in January was a graphic novel memoir called Persepolis, The Story of a Childhood, and I really appreciated the way this story was told for what what the author's story was. It always feels weird to me to rate or critique memoirs. I guess you can critique writing style. Again, reading is the most subversive thing that you can do. It is the most subversive action that you can take. And our author is kind of proof of that in the way her parents took the time to educate her, invest in her education. She went to a French private school before the war had broken out, and her education really was kind of the ticket out of Iran at the time. There are several times where we see our author pick up a book and try and learn more about a particular revolutionary, learn more about other wars and topics and things that help shape her understanding of what was happening during the Iranian Revolution in 1970s. For also graphic novel memoir, I also really liked the art style in this. I wonder if she also illustrated this herself. The ending kind of ended on a cliffhanger, so I immediately borrowed book 2, and it's sitting in my living room right now ready for me to read. Also, I thought that this was great in terms of giving the basics and the very localized perspective of the Iranian Revolution. I would definitely recommend this. Thank you to my friend Sage for gifting this to me. Alright, the next book I read was Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid. This is the first Jamaica Kincaid book I have ever read. I believe this was also gifted to me. My friend thrifted this. In Lucy, we follow our main character, who's 19-year-old Lucy, who I realized was actually unnamed for majority of the novel until the very end. But she moves from, I believe, Antigua to North America to nanny a white family, 4 girls, and a mom and dad. Throughout her experience nannying this family, she is observing the parents, her employers. She's observing their relationship and growing her friendship relationship with the mother, but she's also talking a lot and learning a lot about her own self and sexuality and her relationship with her mom. I think her relationship with her mom was the catalyst for her coming to the United States to explore something new, to get off the island and to build a life for herself. There is a quote that I wanted to share because I just thought this was one example of the way in which the story is told from a post-colonial perspective. There's a scene where Lucy's employer, Mariah, throws a party for her husband Lewis, and there's a section that says, "Now I knew for these people all standing here holding drinks in their hands reminded me of the catalog. Their clothes, their features, the manner in which they carried themselves were the example all the world should copy. They had names like Peters, Smith, Jones, and Richards. Names that were easy on the tongue, names that made the world spin. They had somehow all been to the island. By that, they meant the place where I was from and had fun there. I decided not to like them just on this basis." There are several things that come to mind with this quote. Is one, all these white people at this party who are all dressed the same, who are all dressed in clothing that her father only buys specifically like once a year. They all look the same, and they all look at her home as a place of recreation and fun, and not in the way that she saw it as a place where she grew up and where that was home for a really long time. There's so much to Lucy that I feel like that I could dive deeper into, but another thing that I kept thinking about was just how fiercely independent Lucy was, and I felt like she was an eldest daughter that just wasn't loved in the way that she needed. I'm always looking out for the eldest daughters. Next book I read was actually on audio, but that was The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. I was gifted the Percy Jackson set when I was a kid by my grandmother, and we read, I believe, the first book together, but my best friend and I are currently watching the Percy Jackson show, and I could not remember like a lot of details from the first book when we were watching the first season. So I was like, let me listen to the second book before we watch the second season, and I'm so glad that I did, because I appreciate the way the story is being told in this show. It is already just a little bit different in terms of timeline and storytelling. However, in the show, we have a little bit more perspective in terms of like following Annabeth and following these characters around. And in the books, you're only getting Percy Jackson's perspective, and a lot of the time that comes with moments where they're just kind of info dumping. This is how this happened, like that how it happens in one scene, whereas in the show you kind of see all of the perspectives. So I am kind of a fan of TV and movie adaptations in general. I am usually the type to watch before I read, to be honest with you, to be very honest. And I'm also of the mindset of like, I love the book. I never really see the film or television adaptation like as its twin. It's always like a cousin to me. Grover and Percy's friendship is so extremely important to me, as well as Annabeth and Percy's friendship. And I felt like you really got a deep sense of that friendship in this book. The first book, I felt like we were really building their relationship and trust in each other. Also, as I was reading this, I was reminded that, you know, the characters, particularly with Percy and Clarice, his like bully or arch nemesis, as you could say, I feel like these characters are a good example of what community could look like, it should look like, because one, Clarice has had a lot of character development, and she's gone through a lot with, you know, Percy and Annabeth on their quest in this book, but also the way Percy entrusted Clarice to finish out her quest and recognize that she too was on a quest and she is here to finish out her mission, and he let her do that. I don't know. I just feel like that was just such a small, unique way of showing how to care for your community, because they are all cousins. They're all part of one big family, and the way he had to recognize that, I think, took a lot of guts. Okay, now let's talk about the comic books that I read. I'm so excited about this. Brandon and I walked into our local comic book store, and I was just browsing around, and I saw Roots of Madness on the wall by Stephanie Williams. However, they did not have issue 1, so I bought it online. The artwork is just so beautiful. This is issue 1 of Roots of Madness. Issue 2. The artwork is just so beautiful. How beautiful. And the cover that is coming out in February, the most beautiful cover I have ever seen. In Roots of Madness, we start out in late 1800s Chicago, I believe, and then we transition to early 1900s, like 1905 Chicago. And our main character, Etta, she takes after her mother and generations of women in her family who create natural serums and oils and products and things like that. And in 1905, she's older. I believe her mom has been passed away now for about a few years, and she is approached by a stranger to apply to this Meridian Fellowship, which provides like room, board, things like that, as well as opportunity for research. And so she jumps at the opportunity, and I think that just unlocks a whole lot of ancestral power and magic and spirits. And there are some things and family secrets I think that she's uncovering. I will say the first 3 issues are kind of slow, but I know that there's literally a whole world that the author is building up. Not just one world, there are literally 2 worlds. There's our main character's world as well as the ancestral world that she is harnessing powers from, and I think we'll be experiencing some like supernatural horror type things from. So I'm really, really excited about this, and I saw that in September, volume 1 of this comic book is going to be published. So we'll see if I actually end up buying the volume. If I end up buying just the issues, because the issues are $5 and they're so fun to own, so maybe I'll just keep buying the issues. My camera keeps on overheating, so I'm going to end the video here because that's actually everything that I read in the month of January. My next video, I'm going to talk about the books that I'm looking forward to reading in February, and hopefully, because it's like technically a TBR video, I actually go through with everything that I want to read. So those are the 5 books and 3 comics that I read in the month of January. It was a great first reading month of the new year. I'm so excited. I'm really appreciating and loving the way that I am taking more care into analyzing what I'm reading as well as documenting what I'm reading on paper. Last year I used Storygraph, but I didn't feel as connected to what I was reading. So I'm very excited. Anyway, don't forget to check out the links in my bio, and I appreciate your time, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.